article. All right, I think we're all set. So, all right, so it's June 29th, 1:30 p.m. Solar and Green Building Committee meeting, such as it is. So.
Okay. All right. Well, since David, thanks for joining us. I know you've got a busy schedule. So let's start with, I mean, Patrick, you want to talk about the potential seminar,
Right.
and then we can discuss sort of the the council meeting and the planning commission and council meeting discussion last Thursday.
Yep. Okay. So let's see. So back a while ago, probably about a year, and I think it may have even been pre-COVID, we were talking about having some sort of a seminar for cannabis facilities to talk about sustainability measures that they could implement, not just in the area of energy efficiency, but also things like water efficiency and things like that, so that we could try to steer them in a more sustainable direction. And we had exchanged messages with Jocelyn, I think it's Jocelyn,
Jocelyn King,
who manages the Cannabis Association, and then nothing really came of that. But then recently, one company reached out to us who are actually on the phone today, the Tidwells, and they are planning a facility up on the North End. And I know more facilities are going in up there, and they expressed some interest in identifying some opportunities for energy efficiency, especially in the area of kind of maybe a solar microgrid, that kind of thing. So anyway, so we thought it might be a good idea to pick back up this conversation about having a seminar. And I reached out to Richard from Inland Mechanical, who was on a call with us last month to talk about some of the current or planned incentives from Southern California Edison. So I thought he might be a good person to chat with, and he was very interested in maybe doing a little presentation on HVAC systems and efficiencies that people could achieve with those. And then he said that he might also know somebody who is working in the water arena, who could provide some input on water related savings measures. So anyway, so it sounds like we had some momentum building for at least maybe a fairly informal seminar for people to share some ideas and have some conversation and see where that goes. So I think in terms of the next steps for that, what we'd probably like to do, David, is circle back with Jocelyn to get her back on board and see if we could set something up for August timeframe and have her help us get it advertised, and kind of set a date and get the word out about it. So so I think that's really the next steps. I'd also like to reach out to the like SCE and SoCal Gas to see if they might want to participate or have some folks, and also DWA. So just kind of get the word out about it. So so anyway, so that's where we are at the moment with that.
okay. And also, I just came from a meeting with Katie and the consultant. Patrick, you were on some of the earlier calls last fall. David Burdick, he's in town for a conference. So he invited Katie and me to join him for a coffee downtown. So that's very much in the preliminary stages, but he is working with other CCAs on a distributed energy resource program, sort of what's called distributed PPA, and that could potentially work very well with grow facilities, particularly since they're going to have solar obligations like all other commercial facilities under the new energy code. We can talk about that a little bit. So obviously we want to get DCE involved, because most of the people will be getting their, unless they've opted out or gone to direct access, they'll be getting their electricity from DCE.
Right. Right.
DC is also involved in that, and maybe David could potentially do a quick presentation on his proposal. Once again, it's not had any sort of formal DC board blessing, but it is something that would work very well for grow facilities and other large industrial commercial users.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, good. So we'll continue to make some phone calls and see who we can get interested. And I think that would be another interesting topic to cover, as well as energy storage. So want to definitely reach out to energy storage folks as well. So.
Yeah, Hot Purple, Renova, all the others are, very big. What I've heard is that all new solar facilities are accompanied by storage, and of course, on the commercial side, DC's got its solar and storage
Right.
plant contracted. So you want to hold this in August, or you want to meet in August, hold it in the fall? I wasn't clear exactly what your timing was.
I mean, I'd love to do it as soon as we can, quite
Okay.
honestly, especially based on the pace at which things are going with facilities. I don't necessarily want to wait, even if it's a little more informal than it might normally be.
Okay.
I would rather have the conversation and see if we can at least get some people interested in the ideas.
Okay, great.
Yep. So.
All right. I'm out the midweek in the 17th, the evening of the 16th through the morning of the 20th of August, but otherwise I'm around. Okay. But the week that we normally would meet, I dared to take off and go to Los Angeles.
Okay. All right. So,
but I can help you out, and we can work on putting folks together, and we can bring in more. As our new commissioners are welcome to volunteer for this.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. So that's sort of part one of that conversation. Again, we'll try to move forward pretty quickly on trying to nail something down for that. And then part two of the conversation is based on comments that were raised at the commission meeting, or I'm sorry, the council meeting on the Thursday, about two facilities that are in the works and apparently applied to planning for some sort of approval. And David, you can tell us a little bit more detail about that. But one of the things that came up was with regard to requiring some energy efficiency measures for those facilities, and the interest by Planning Commission to do a special study session on them. And I wanted to make sure that David was aware of the work that David Newell was aware of the work that we had done previously on that topic. And maybe share a little bit of that information with him and kind of refresh our memories about that, so that they would be informed moving forward. So David, do you want to tell us maybe just a little bit more about those facilities and kind of where they're at in the process?
Yeah, so in the past month, the Planning Commission has considered two projects north of the 10 freeway. One was, the most recent one was a 200,000 square foot facility, well, total 200,000, expanding from the 40,000 that is existing. So the commission, of course, had some concerns about the amount of energy required to handle all of the grow that would be occurring there. So the commission asked that they wanted to impose a requirement that solar be provided on site to address some of the solar demands of the facility. It's just, I think the issue is that legally we can't impose that requirement unless we have some sort of ordinance in place. Mm-hmm. At least that was the opinion of the city attorney, from kind of just off the cuff hearing that comment and not knowing, we weren't really prepared to address it at the most recent meeting. The meeting before that, when we talked about a different facility, it was a new facility, but the comment wasn't brought up. So I think obviously there's more attention being paid to the amount of energy that these facilities are, how much they're required to, how much they need to operate the cultivation. So with that, I think now it's becoming more apparent that we should start looking at a way to address it through either a condition if we could, and ultimately the city attorney's opinion was we couldn't unless we have some sort of regulatory program or ordinance in place. So that's kind of where that's how that kind of all has come about more recently. After the commission took action on the expansion project, they said basically there was a consensus that they wanted to take a further dive into the topic so that we could address this issue through ordinance. So right now, I guess our next steps from our side is we're going to work with our city attorney's office to make sure we bring forward a program that, well, present a program that the commission and council can consider, but make sure it's within the legal requirements that we're able to do. Just because I'm not familiar with whatever the California Energy Commission or utility purveyors. My understanding is that there's limitations that local jurisdictions can impose on new projects from those entities.
And I can that, David, when appropriate.
So yeah, if you've delved into that stuff, I'd be curious.
I spent literally the last years, I don't know how many years, becoming essentially the regulatory expert, and I was a regulatory and energy and water projects lawyer in my practice before I moved to Palm Springs. So this is stuff that I'm very familiar with. Okay. So the very quick answer is, and Patrick, maybe you can forward my note to David so he sees that. The quick answer is good news, which is the Energy Commission and the 2022 Energy Code, which the Energy Commission will approve in August at their August business meeting, and it'll go into effect as of January 1, 2023, part of the triennial cycle. And you may recall from past council meetings every 3 years, right at the couple weeks before the code goes into effect, council does an omnibus adoption ordinance. So it's in Title 8 of the municipal code. So for this code cycle, the pending code cycle, one of the big moves, they kind of did a lot of residential stuff in the 2019 code cycle currently into effect. 2022 is where they take a big bite of the apple for commercial and industrial projects. So as of 2023, January 1, 2023, nearly all commercial and industrial projects, including warehouses, will be required to have both solar and storage. So that will be, because it's a mandatory state requirement, that will be a Palm Springs requirement under the 804, I think 65 is the Energy Code one, but is in the Chapter 804 Omnibus Building Code section. So that will become city law in roughly 18 months. One of the challenges, particularly for grow facilities, is that, so there are minimums, you can obviously build more, and it's also based on your available rooftop. So some of these projects, particularly the greenhouses, it looked like the one that the Planning Commission approved on June 9 looked from the schematic in the staff report to be a greenhouse. I wasn't sure about the one you guys approved last week because it looked like a flat roof. But anyway, if there's no roof access or limited roof access, then there's only a minimum clearly insufficient to power a 24/7 grow facility. So a couple of things is that the city can do,
So David, can you just, for when we had talked about this kind of a requirement before, we talked about the idea that it could be renewable energy either on the facility or so I wasn't sure if the current plan for that ordinance that'll be effective 2023 has that sort of clause in it or does not?
No, I literally was about to say these are the things these are the things that the city could do.
Yeah.
So the regulatory framework is some solar and storage as of January 1, 2023. The city could take the requirement and adopt it early. That would require approval by the California Energy Commission. It's called what's called a REACH code, and you have to go through Energy Commission approval, and you have to have a cost effectiveness study. Now, the Energy Commission does have a cost effectiveness study, so that's on file, but it's based on 2023 predicted energy prices. So you need to contact the consultant and probably do a separate sort of mini cost effectiveness study if you wanted to put it into effect on 2022. Hopefully that wouldn't cost that much money. This should be done because it's a building code provision. It really should be done in the building code as opposed to trying to do it in the zoning code. Patrick is aware that we've had previous discussions of potential conflicts between zoning code and the building code. It's because it's dynamic, and every 3 years the energy code changes, and all REACH codes that potentially go beyond it have to be reauthorized by the Energy Commission. So it's easier to do that in the building code. It doesn't change the substance, it's just sort of where you sort of park it in the code, in the municipal code universe. So that's one thing. But then to answer the question that Patrick has raised is last year, pre-COVID, but right pre-COVID, as DC was launching and as part of my state REACH code working group, I became aware of an ordinance from San Francisco, which is independent of the energy code. It does not affect building energy efficiency, but it essentially says, and Patrick, you have that draft, and that can be fast tracked to council because it's essentially already written, is that says that all commercial facilities and cannabis facilities basically have to go 100% carbon-free energy. They can do it through DCE, they can do it through SCE. There's something called direct access. So if you're a large enough customer, you're allowed under CPUC rules to bypass DCE and SCE and just buy it from somewhere else. So some large customers, and I don't know whether that's the case of any cannabis facilities, some large customers could do that, but you could also get 100% renewables from there. So that would be the requirement. And the nice thing about that is that because it does not have anything to do with energy efficiency, i.e. the building envelope, you can just pass it probably through the building code, although theoretically you can do it in the zoning code. I drafted the building code. That does not require Energy Commission approval. So that would be
and
that's fast track.
Right. Then that's the direct. Yeah, that's the direction we were sort of leaning in if we were going to go there for those types of facilities. And
and you can, and then the nice thing about that is that you could target it. You could just say cannabis facilities. You could just say certain cannabis facilities. So that can be more surgical. The way I draft it, once again, based on San Francisco, is in a phase in saying, everybody of a certain size, I forget the threshold of more than 10,000 square feet, has to do it and phase it in. But that's just sort of a placeholder draft ordinance based on what San Francisco, I took the San Francisco thresholds and I think I cut them in like by 10 just because our buildings are a lot smaller. But that's the theory. And I did speak with Barry Hooper of sort of the equivalent office of sustainability in San Francisco. He's in our working groups, and he confirmed that you didn't have to go through Energy Commission approval, and they did not go through Energy Commission approval on that. So that's fast tracked, doesn't have to go through the Energy Commission, doesn't have to be reauthorized, doesn't have to get a cost effectiveness study. So I would recommend that approach as opposed to trying to do something that's already going to affect ahead of time, because by the time you already get it into effect, it's already time for the new code. And once again, you'd have to do it twice, because as I said, every time there's a new code, the Energy Commission wants to see a new filing. So I won't say it can't be done, but there are a lot of hoops to do that, as opposed to concentrating on identifying what commercial facilities, cannabis or otherwise, we think should get a 100% renewable energy, which of course is already available, and many of them already are on DCE carbon free. They just have to do that or SCE or direct access.
So one question I have about that, David, and maybe David Newell has the same question, but or maybe he knows the answer, is that if we were to do something like that in the building code and have it effective, let's say hypothetically at the end of the year, then that would affect businesses that are submitting their applications after that or are actually going into construction after that. So what's the sort of timing element of, like, if it were in place, say at the end of the year, would that affect anything that's being, like, has gone through David's process of planning and hasn't necessarily put, shovel to ground yet?
The way I drafted it based on San Francisco is it's done under the city's police power. So it's a separate ordinance. It's a separate chapter of the municipal code outside of the building code. It's in Title 8, but it's a separate chapter of Title 8 outside of the 804, building code universe. And the way I understand, and I can organize a conference call with Barry Hooper in San Francisco, but the way I understand is that this was a police power. To give you an example, Patrick, foodware, okay? It just, you got to do it. And we're going to give you time to do it, but you got to do it. And it applies to everybody, and it's independent of any specific project.
Okay. So even if a facility is in place already, it could apply to them too?
Yes. So that's what San Francisco did. And, we can organize a call and get, BBK to talk with their legal in San Francisco, et cetera. But it's done outside of the energy code universe, outside of the building code universe, but done as essentially under the city's inherent, particularly as a charter city, city's inherent health, safety, and welfare police powers.
Got it.
You can add a whole bunch of findings and say this is necessary, all the bells and whistles, to do that. And I'm happy to work with BBK on all of that stuff. But the ordinance, as I said already, that's the draft. Yep. And it can be tweaked for phase in, and it can be tweaked on who's targeted. But essentially, it just says it's a thou shalt.
Right.
At a certain date, thou shalt.
Yeah, and I love that idea for two reasons. One is it sort of in essence is retroactive, like we would be able to apply it to existing facilities as well as new facilities, but it also gives people the flexibility of how they approach that mandate. So like Jeff has been talking about microgrids, that could apply. If you have a greenhouse, then you have to just purchase it. If you have a flat roof, then you could install it. So it gives people a variety of things that they could do. And even on the north end, as I was talking to Jeff about, one of the folks we would like to have come in and talk is somebody who does micro wind turbines, right? Because we're putting all these facilities up there north of I-10, which there's always wind blowing up there. So why not, right?
No, that would make sense.
Yeah.
And some of those bells and whistles, I'm probably not in my draft because the draft is obviously 18 months old and it's based on San Francisco, so it doesn't have an effect. But I entirely agree with that. I've learned a lot more about the microgrids. Another one of the CPUC proceedings that I've been following on microgrids, and David Burdick's distributed energy. Just perfect timing that we were scheduled to meet with him today, and so I updated him and Katie on that we are going to have this discussion. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's a PPA model that would go through DCE if adopted, and essentially as you get solar, but but via DCE and in a slightly cheaper way than you'd otherwise pay. So that that's something can be worked on, and I think there's just a lot more flexibility to do an ordinance on this approach as opposed to the energy code, just because the state has David, from all of the mandates that you get from the state, it's exceedingly prescriptive, and you just don't muck around with the thou shalts from Sacramento, and this is among them. And it's just easier to do something independent of the energy code and let the state do its thing, and then we can focus on this and achieves exactly the same objective. Is we don't care how you get your renewables, we just want you to get renewables. So I'm happy, Patrick, you have the draft. It's one of those sort of side projects that I like to do. And so I'm really happy that I've already done the basic research.
Right.
And it's there. and we can, create a group, a small working group, sit down with you and David and BBK and, maybe one of the planning commissioners, however you want to do it, and folks from building, because at least my thought is that it goes in Title 8, so they need to be, on a sort of amend their title without them being involved. And one of the questions that I have that a building should know is, for these grow facilities, are they classified as warehouses? Are they greenhouses? And David knows you should also be aware, and it's not something that I focus on quite so much, but there's what's called controlled CEH, controlled environmental horticulture, i.e. greenhouses, grow houses, and they are actually going to have indoor water and lighting requirements as part of the new code as well. So there's some other bells and whistles that are coming in via the code that will help on that. And actually that goes, Patrick, is to say we should identify somebody as part of we should grab as part of our seminar. We should find somebody, maybe Energy Code ACE, but we should find somebody. I can check with my buddies at the commission to see if we have somebody who can, phone in a couple of slides on what the new energy code will have for those issues.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Probably Javier Perez, you may recall that he's the guy. He's one of the guys who spoke at our training session. But I've got lots of buddies at the Energy Commission, so I can ask them once we kind of have a format.
Great. Okay.
So that would be I think, Patrick and David, that would be my recommendation to Planning Commission, Sustainability City Council, that we go that way as opposed to something that deals with the energy code and leave the state to do its thing with the sort of knowledge this will be mandatory as of January 1, 2023. So there's additional stuff coming in on that. And Patrick, if you haven't, you can send my note to David so he's aware of all of these things.
I did do that, so he's
great.
got it. So David, maybe what I can do is maybe put a little package together for you. And I don't know if you want to share that with planning folks, commission folks, or if you feel like they still want to have a special session on it and kind of talk through options. But I'll kind of leave that up to you.
Yeah, I think we'll certainly want to kind of touch on some of the important points when they're considering an ordinance like this. The probably easiest approach, like David's been talking about, to get to the outcome we want. We want carbon-free use of energy use, ideally, and whether that's through requiring solar panels on the project. And that sounds like it could be the hard way out based on what is required from the Energy Commission, or just saying, we think we can help achieve our sustainability goals by also allowing other options, especially if we're trying to do it at a more quick time frame, and a more quick time frame than would otherwise be required. So yeah, if I think generally those are some just things we can talk about before we finalize an ordinance for them.
Yeah, and David, I'm available if you want me to do a presentation, or you want to work on a staff report, and I can come in or Zoom it in or however you want. So just keep me posted. But I did forward my note to Patrick and immediately forwarded it to Kathy. I had seen her just a couple already days before that. And I've been following this issue, and because all the other stuff I'm doing with Patrick, I hadn't had a chance to sort of buttonhole you guys on it. So I'm very happy that Planning Commission and staff kind of raised it to the council level, because it's something that was kind of in my parked, sitting at the parking meter and waiting to come back. And this is probably a good time as any to start bringing those things back.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Anything else on that front?
Okay, well, that's good.
Great.
All right, so Patrick and David, you'll keep me posted and let me know how I can assist and have a sort of working group to move this forward.
Okay.
And Jeff also is aware of this because I sent him yesterday morning. I saw him on Saturday at an event at Lisa's, and I sent him my note. And we had a very brief informal discussion. He seems to think that this is doable.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Cool. All right. So are we ready to move on next topic?
Okay. So do you wanna sort of do an overall sort of GHG inventory, and then we can talk
Yeah.
about specifics for energy efficiency, residential energy efficiency, and transportation, or how do you
Right.
want to handle this, Patrick?
Sure. So a couple of things. So I did sent you guys an email prior to the call. I did have a brief conversation with PlaceWorks on Thursday. So as we know, they are basically done with their current work for us on the 2010 update and the 2018 assessment and the 2020 look ahead. I did inquire as to whether or not they had some more money available to help us with some further analyses. And so in particular, I talked to them about giving us kind of a high level sense of where they thought we might have the most opportunities for further reductions. They of course didn't actually get into any detail, but I mentioned that we were working on reach codes, and then they chimed in and say, yes, you should absolutely work on reach codes that move towards electrification. So they were like, that's really the opportunity that you have to get rid of gas, like natural gas use and that kind of thing. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting, but again, we didn't get it.
I'll address that when
yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so they thought that was a good idea to kind of have a more in-depth analysis of that. And then I also talked to them about, Roy, the kind of stuff that we had talked about in terms of kind of scenario modeling in terms of transportation alternatives. And I brought up specifically that we really wanted to know more about what kind of was behind the model and what things we could do that would have the most impact. So because I did actually do a little bit of tweaking with the model, and I put in, and it's basically just a data table, but I put in like 0 cars on the road, and it was amazing. Like we totally meet our goals, so we're good to go. So just that's the only thing we have to do is just get every car off the road. So anyway, so I think that that's the kind of stuff we would want them to work with them, but they have actually a whole their subcontractor on their contract currently is a transportation subcontractor. And so they're the ones with all the transportation data. So it would likely be an engagement conversation with them to kind of help us think through some of those options and alternatives and give us a little bit more data on that front. And then I also talked a little bit to them about the work that they're doing on climate adaptation, which has sort of been a side note on a lot of the stuff that we've been writing about. But I feel like that conversation needs to be elevated to a certain extent, given all of our talks about homelessness and increasing temperatures and increasing wind and all this other stuff. So anyway, so I think they will be ready to have some recommendations here in the, I think probably late August timeframe. So we may be able to incorporate that into something that we would prepare as well. But again, I think just having some better sense from them about impacts and vulnerabilities and things like that would be very helpful for us to have in our pocket in terms of other things that we could think about addressing. So anyway, so what I'm going to do with what I promised them is I would just give them an email with some of the basically scope ideas that we had in terms of what we might be looking for from them, so that they could get back to us with some cost information so that we could add a little money to the contract to help make that happen. So anyway, so that's kind of where we are with that. And it kind of dovetails nicely with our strategic planning effort. But anyway, so that is sort of one element of this. What that does, in my opinion, is provides us with more context to go forward to council to say, here's the big picture of what we're looking at in terms of here's our goal that we have to reach, here's our major points of emission, and here are kind of the things that will be most helpful to us as we move forward in terms of achieving more reductions. And it would serve kind of as an agenda for council and for us to say, okay, yeah, those are in fact the things we want to focus on, and how quickly or what's the timing in which we could do that. I brought it up with city manager on, I guess it was last week when we were talking about future agenda items. He is very cautious about what he puts on an agenda in terms of it being actionable. So to the extent where we are ready to go to them to say, here's the context, here's the ideas that we have, here's the specific feedback that we are looking for from you, and then go from there. I think that's really what he's looking for. Anyway, that's kind of where we are with that. I don't think anything is going to go forward on July 22nd, and I think that it would be a little bit premature. I want to have that at least some of that transportation discussion and some of the conversation with PlaceWorks to just kind of get a little bit of high level feedback from them so that we could have that framework for that conversation. So,
okay, all right, that's fine. Obviously, we want to do these things, so that all makes sense. I guess where, and it's a question of what if anything I can do, where my proposal fits in. It does address resiliency because it helps people essentially weatherize their houses. I mean, it's
right,
not presented there, but
right.
it literally is put in a cool roof, so when it's 121 degrees, like it's at, or 123, you're not then having to blast all of your air conditioning.
Right.
To do that, add insulation, things like that. So
Right.
as I mentioned, only because we've already done the strong work with DCE and carbon free, that the GHG portion of it isn't as prominent, but only because most people are getting their electricity. But I was speaking to Katie, and you heard Council Jeff's discussion of Flex Alert. Obviously, and DCE just got additional resource adequacy requirements from the CPUC. It clearly meets alliance with DCE's policy of reducing electricity requirements, because that means whether it may be carbon free, but you still either have to put it on the rooftop or out in the desert somewhere, and those have environmental impact. So it saves people money. It saves energy, which in itself is a good thing. It isn't as decarbonizing as other measures would be, but only because we've already done their work. We've done most of that work. Now it's independent or addition to. So we can do. There are some electrification that you saw in the proposal. It basically says that if you're putting in a solar, please put in the electric ready. And if you're doing like a kitchen, and that's sort of discussions we can have with building, and maybe Patrick, we take advantage of the summer and sit down with the building folks and we can tweak the ordinance, because we have not had a chance to do that, and I'm happy would welcome that opportunity. So there is some electrification measures. The big push, which council has to give direction for, is doing what really the entire Bay Area has done, is essentially eliminating natural gas on new houses. Now, the new energy code, as I mentioned, goes partly there, so everyone will have to go with most likely with heat pump water heaters. So that is one area. They can still use heating, space heating. That will probably go away in 2025. So once again, it's a question of, does the city council want to advance sort of what clearly is the progress out of Sacramento? Now, all the environmentalists have said 3 more years of building new houses is 3 more years of gas connections, which then last decades. So it isn't just the 3 years. The commission has decided for various reasons not to go there. There are lots of legal issues, including the federal preemption that I meant. So that is not something that I've done just because it requires way more firepower than I can do on my own. I'm well aware of the issues. I have all of the ordinances or whatever, but it's going to require, consultants, and without going to the politics, you can imagine that there will be strong opposition from that. So council can give that sort of green light. But I'm not walking myself into that. I've walked around it. Let's just put it.
Yeah.
But that's intentional.
Right. Yeah. We've tried to pray pretty carefully on that, and I think that that first piece that you talked about was a really nice way to kind of dovetail what I was saying in terms of the context for this. Right. So if they tell us, PlaceWorks tell us that the biggest bang for your buck in terms of carbon emissions is to attack or to address natural gas use, then that gives us the ammunition to say, hey, this is, the best, the most aggressive thing we could do is get rid of that altogether, and then maybe here's another option or two. So they could kind of see what the options are.
And the two of them are complementary. So, because one only affects existing houses and the other could only affect new houses.
Right.
What we had seen working with Lisa on solar and input from the building industry is that there are a lot more existing housing in Palm Springs than new housing. So, that's something that, David will have the RHNA numbers and everything like that. So PlaceWorks, of course, has that as well. So they can use that for modeling, for their modeling. I would love to go there, but it's beyond anything that I can do on my own. So council would have to give you, additional support. And there's a whole bunch of consultants who would love to, help us out on that. And I can work with them, but that requires strong direction from city council.
Or perhaps Alberto will step up and Alberto will take it on as a building code change, and so we can.
Yeah.
Or perhaps David wants to jump in there.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't really, for my piece, I've pretty much gone as far as I can go. We can work over the summer. I have questions for the building folks. What this ordinance kind of punts around is the multifamily stuff, because I just could not penetrate the spreadsheets, the Excel spreadsheets enough to kind of get a feel of what projects are happening on the multifamily. So that part of it probably needs a little bit more work or fine tuning. Right now, it's kind of just everything. I haven't distinguished between multifamily and single family. It's just all one pot. So that probably needs work. The single family is I think pretty clear, and that's essentially what's done on Chula Vista. And that's, if you're, doing a whole bunch of things, this is, what we expect you to do, and this is how much money you would save. So that works. That probably doesn't need too much more refinement. The multifamily needs, probably needs some more work there. So, if you want to, when you're back, come up with a working session, and get Alberto involved. I think this is more building than planning, although once again, I'm happy to have planning involved, just because it's more retrofits than new buildings.
Yeah. So, and Roy, I don't know if you had any comments or questions, if you wanted to jump in, but.
I guess the only thing that I'd say is, I think we should move along as quickly getting the information from PlaceWorks related to transportation, and you've made good progress. And I like Justin's point about when we bring something to the council, it should be actionable, so that we can basically set groundwork, start working from, and when we go back to them, they'll remember what had been decided.
Right. Yep. So on a related topic, and maybe this, I jotted this down as maybe another analytical point. I received a phone call, I think it was last week, from a resident who was very concerned about water use and was basically observing that, a few years ago, I guess it was probably 2016 when we had the water, the drought and all the restrictions, that people were asked to convert to desertscape, reduce all their water use. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, we see all these new developments going in, new housing tracts, new businesses, new other things that are all using water. And so you could sort of relate this to energy as well, is that I think one of the things that we may be lacking or would be an interesting analytical exercise is to think about these our longer term developments in terms of their environmental impact. And I think that is part of what the general plan update is looking at in some regard, is to look at kind of what things are maybe on the horizon or where the city may be going, and kind of assess the environmental impacts to that. But I think it would be nice if we could get to a point where we could say more about that, right? Especially if we're doing some sort of a climate strategy, to say that, okay, all of the stuff that we're doing will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions this much. But if we have 10 more developments go in, we're talking about increasing it this much. So I think I haven't really wrapped my head about what that looks like or how to address that. But I think that has to sort of come into the conversation a little bit, because the caller was upset about the fact that he did all of this work to bring his water usage down, and then all of a sudden we're letting just anybody build a house without any real indication of whether or not they are doing stuff in a smart way. So anyway, so that was kind of I just thought I'd share that.
Next time somebody calls, I can give you some ammunition. First
Okay.
of all, the energy code regulates water in indoor plumbing. So anything that's built new is going to be a lot more efficient. And
Sure.
you'll recall, you've seen it. It was just when I came onto the commission, because I helped out on it. It's a water efficient landscaping ordinance that substantially limits what you can do outside. So anything that's built new will be both inside and outside a lot more efficient. So you can thank the caller for everything that he's done, but also reassure him that anything that goes in new essentially will be equivalent to what he's already done inside, and probably more so because he wouldn't do that. And also tying back to my proposal, it does have what's called the water heating package. One of figures is you need to buy low flow faucets. So that will reduce both energy use, i.e. you're sending less hot water out your faucets for taking a shower or washing your dishes. So it has both an energy and a water component.
Right. So it did sort of prompt me to think that, wouldn't it be nice if we had some sort of a requirement in the city that every development was a net negative energy and water use, or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, well,
I think we can do it on water use, but at least energy, right?
What I will do, Patrick, and it's just, there's just so much stuff going on, that is one of our monthly reach code presentations. And so I'll just look at the materials I'll send. There actually are water reach codes. One of them was purple piping. I don't think that works here, just because DWA already has, you're well aware that DWA already has its recycling plant. So I don't think that's now, unless they decide to decommission their recycling plant, not impossible with the city, as we know, that's a whole separate discussion. But purple piping would probably be superfluous. So some of the more progressive, quote unquote, cities are now requiring for new developments that your excess water goes in for landscape irrigation. So we can do that, but once again, the water is being, city, and then DWA is taking that water. And there may be some other things that there probably are some more stricter versions of the water efficient landscape ordinance. So I would have to take a look at that, but that would be the next step on things to do, and those generally, I would have to check whether those require Energy Commission. I think they're more focused on water conservation. So I don't think they require going through the Energy Commission, but you can imagine that this is something that people are looking at. What's our next step? What's our water? Is there water reach codes? So that they actually exist. And I'll send you that material, and we can work on that. And that
Cool.
would be among the options to present to council, saying, and we can, and that would be for new developments.
Right, right. Cool.
So there's just more material than we actually kind of know how to process,
Right.
In many respects, which is good because that work. Yeah, I'm sorry to monopolize, Roy.
Roy.
I just have a couple of comments on the water point. I've heard Ashley speak about that. I think it was at one of our Four Seasons annual meetings, but where she compares the water efficiency in new houses to the use of water in older houses, and it's quite impressive. I guess the other thing I wanted to say was just thinking about Patrick's comment about new developments and taking them into account as we do our projections for GHG reductions. It's really accepting the fact that our base is not static. Our base is growing as we go along, and we need to take that.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we can't stop. The city has RHNA obligations, so those developments are going to go. The city has to do that. I think our job is to work with planning to do mitigation. So yes, we're going to build new developments. This is what we should expect of our new developments, so that their environmental footprint is as low as we can do, while we still encourage new housing, because we have to, and personally think it's the right thing to do. Another completely issue, but I don't think it's a planning commission issue, is density, and single family homes are by definition a lot more energy and water intensive than multifamily. But that's a whole that is not in our jury. We can comment on it, we can note it, but that's the responsibility of the planning commission.
Right. And so again, I don't want to belabor this too much, but so yes and no, right? So if you're building like the Cody project, where you're shoving 3 units into one basically lot of a single family home, is it really 3 to 1 that we're offset? So anyway, so it's stuff like that you think about, and visually it doesn't make sense, but I don't know if the math works out, right? So anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that goes through.
I mean, I think there are a couple of multifamily units, but a smaller, I think those qualify as single family, under both zoning and the building code.
Right.
As opposed to, there are, and it's the same thing also with Miralon, there are multifamily, but I think they're duplexes.
Right, but they're high density, right?
Yeah,
so
they're higher density. Yeah. The only high density that we may have is the grid project, which is a whole another issue. Obviously, people are concerned about their views, and so high rises are not going to happen here in Palm Springs. But honestly, that's where so we can sort of point that out, but anecdotally, etc. I think our probably main role is to work with planning and say, this is what's expected to be built under the RHNA assessment. This is what the city can do to make those developments as energy and water efficient as possible.
Right. Okay.
I'm happy to work with you on that, because as I said, the Bay Area in particular has been leaders on all of this stuff. So the materials exist.
Okay. All right.
I'll shut up and let you guys talk about transportation. I'm sorry, I've been on my
Well, I don't know. Do we need to talk more about it? I think we're moving in the right direction on that. We just need to engage them in answering some of those questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think I saw that mix of vehicles, EV charging. Yeah, the cities I saw at the end. Thank you very much. The city lead by example there. And the one thing, but it's obviously part of what Lisa's doing at RCTC, with Sunline is there are really no, until we get Amtrak, there's really no way to connect. I mean, there's the Amtrak service, but it's, not very convenient into Fullerton. There really isn't a way to connect from Palm Springs into the Metrolink station. You can do it, I think, from Palm Desert, but you can't do it from Palm Springs. So that may be a discussion, with Lisa about whether there's demand to connect to Riverside. There is literally no way to get by public transportation. If I ever had to get to Riverside, I cannot do that by public transportation.
Right.
And Amtrak does not sell that ticket. You can't get a ticket to the bus. The bus is just sort of drop off or pick up, but you can't do a Palm Springs to Riverside on the Amtrak bus.
Right.
They'll take you there, but you can't buy the ticket.
Right.
So that's a link. I mentioned that when we had our the listening session at the Demuth Community Center. Our kind of largest missing links are long distance or regional to connect with Amtrak and Metrolink better than we do. And also hyper local, which is to say I'm more than a mile from Palm Canyon, so I cannot do that except by car, or in terms of shopping or whatever.
Right.
So we don't have the equivalent of LA DOT dash buses for some of these local links, which kind of the buzz was. I mean, the buzz was very kind of on that model. So where the city would come up for that kind of money and whether there's enough demand for it's a whole nother story. But those are clearly impediments. There's a last mile problem and there's a sort of multi-mile regional problem.
Yeah.
So those are the points that I raised at the listening session.
Right, and that would be another good question about for PlaceWorks too, in the sense that maybe they could give us a little more insight about focusing. If we were to focus some energy on that, what would that yield for us?
Yeah, and so does the city need to work with Sunline to subsidize those? Is there the demand? If you build that kind of network, would people come, etc. I don't have the answer to that questions. I just note that I would love to drive. I don't drive very much. I have to fill up my car for the first time this calendar year. But there are things that if I could get a bus to smoke free, that would be great.
Right. Okay. All right. I think we're done with that.
Okay. All right. A lot of work to do.
Yes.
Okay. Anything new to report on EV chargers?
No, they're still going through the permitting process, and I think we're for the City Hall project. We are down to one easement, some sort of an easement for the property, so that SCE can access the site. So I believe that we are super close on at least one of those components to start with.
Okay. All right. So that's good news then. Okay.
Yeah.
Sustaining. Okay. So anything else on EV charger? We can move sustainability, scholarship, and home energy assessment rebates. So we're basically, the scholarship is kind of ending in its current fashion tomorrow. Will you be rolling out the new version, or what's the sort of the transition plan for that?
Yeah, so Tracy and I were talking about that this morning. We're gonna work on the messaging for that when I get back from vacation, so that we can post something new. And now that the ordinance, the foodware ordinance, will go final basically on the second reading in July, or at the first meeting in July. So we'll work on kind of creating a new structure for that. And then we did get one home energy assessment, which we shared with you. And then we will continue to have money rollover for that. So
that's fine. If somebody calls and said what I should be looking for, so that it qualifies, but I was a bit frustrated. I don't know what the homeowner thought, but I was a bit frustrated that it isn't what I got, and what I found was very useful, which is to say, this is the issue with your house, and this is what you should do with your house. And
right.
you do this, this is how much money you will save.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I completely agree. And that's what when Tracy and I saw it, we were like, this seems a little limited to me.
I
And
give $100, but if somebody else calls you, and I went and looked at the person that I had been in contact with, and yeah, they have a much more robust reporting format.
right, right,
So if people call you, you can sort of offer that advice if that's what they should be looking for.
right, right. And granted, there was some super low hanging fruit there in terms of their systems. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know.
Well, but that's the energy. That's why I drafted the energy efficiency ordinance, because these older houses are just
Yeah,
exceedingly energy inefficient.
right,
And anything that you do will save you tons of money because you won't be basically air conditioning the desert.
right, right,
Which is what if you live in a mid-century modern house, that's generally what you're doing.
right.
Um, and it just, that's our housing stock, and that's where, that ordinance is intentionally designed to align with our, with our housing stock. So that's good to continue to promote that, and hopefully we'll get more people to do that.
Yep.
So that's good.
Right.
Quickly on legislative and regulatory updates. So on the energy code, which as I said, I've been following exceedingly closely. All the comments were due last Monday, the 21st. There will be some tweaks. I don't expect any kind of radical changes. There are a lot of industry groups who, will comment on very, very narrow issues that I'm not that much in the weeds on. But I think the general approach of a partial electrification is what's happening. There are legal issues, federal preemption issues that some people have raised. I assume commission lawyers will deal with that. Hopefully they will not, the Energy Commission won't get sued for saying this is, a violation of federal law. And so we'll see what's happening, but that's kind of what I expect. And there'll be what's called 15-day language, and that'll be out in another couple of weeks, where the Energy Commission will say, well, this is pretty close to the final version, so we need your now or never comments, and we're expected to approve it, in August. So I expect that probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure with the timing if it's right before the commission meeting or not.
Right.
So I'll provide an update on that. Elsewhere on Sacramento, I think you probably saw Katie's email that SB 612, which is the PCIA issue, may get held up in the Assembly committee meeting tomorrow. So we'll see where that's going. The city had, it issued the support letter. SB 617 seems to be also in that limbo because it did not get out of committee in the Senate committee, and I haven't heard anything from it. So I think it's kind of, on hold for the rest of this legislative year. I sent you yesterday the links to some NREL solar app workshops. So you can maybe get Tasia to sit on, and, in our spare time, we can perhaps, once that workshop is there, maybe it would be a good time to have a follow-up call. Whether Tasia can do that, but maybe I can arrange with you and Tasia a follow-up call with Jeff Cook, maybe in August after that's there, because that's also something. You can add that to your list of things to do with council, particularly since council has already expressed support, for 617. So we don't need Sacramento to tell us to use the solar app. We can do it on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So you can add that to your list of things to request direction for. And honestly, that's purely administrative, doesn't require any ordinance at all. It's just, get staff to use it, and to work with the solar developers to use that. So so that's also in the, in the quiver that we can, present to council of things that we can do to encourage, solar and adaptation. There's a new, well, I can sort of all sort of, there's another way I put in the agenda between DC and the regulatory, but the CPUC issued a resource adequacy decision last week, and DC will have additional procurement obligations for renewables and storage, and Katie said they'll be looking at that. So there's a whole bunch of other things. I've been focusing on these things. I'll in my written report, I'll just add a couple of bullet points. Obviously, the legislative session is continuing, so I'll do an update. Probably so you'll have it when you get back from from your vacation, because it'll be the most up to date. So I'll follow up on that. So specifically on DCE, they approved the budget last week. Electricity rates are very, very tight right now, and particularly with the heat dome in the Pacific Northwest, which is where the water comes from. So they're, potentially, they're working through all of these things, and there may potentially need to be a temporary rate hike to deal with that. But obviously, that's a real challenge for electricity rates. Having the windmills and the solar farm go online will obviously help, because those are fixed prices at much lower rates than the spot rates are right now. And also there's some really robust, and I'll include the link in my report, but I had pushed Katie and Benjamin to beef up the energy efficiency information on the website, and that's now done. It's quite spiffy, and you can link to that directly, actually. In your stuff, you say for more information, you can link to the DC website. So SE, but DC has done a really good job on that. So we'll see Cathedral City pulls out as of tomorrow night. So it'll just be Palm Desert and Palm Springs. And Katie said that Palm Desert, because of the rate issues, they had decided not to launch for municipal on 2022. So their next launch window decision would have to be made early next year for potentially 2023, but for at least all of 2021 and 2022, it's just Palm Springs.
Yeah. And is there any sort of cutoff date for the JPA if Palm Desert continues to not participate?
No, not really. They can just
Okay.
be, they can just sort of hang on and provide input. And Sabby Donovan, as you know, is some really good input.
Yep.
I think Jeff appreciates that. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, I think, well, I can't really speak for Palm Desert, certainly, but the rates will be able to be more stabilized in the next year or so once these long-term projects are locked in. The challenge right now is energy is largely coming from the spot market, just because we're a new player, and the contracts don't hit, the projects don't go operational for another year or so. So that may, DC may be able to give Palm Desert a little bit more rate, certainty than I think anybody can get right now.
Right.
So we'll see. It can be operated. There are single city CCAs. Pico Rivera has one. It's called Prime. So that can be done. But I think for the moment, certainly the hope is that Palm Desert continues and then is able to join at least for municipal accounts once rates are more stabilized.
Right. Okay.
And then, as I said, Katie and I met this morning with a consultant who potentially could propose a distributed energy, essentially virtual distributed PPA for commercial and industrial users. And so that may go to the board as an RFP to get a consultant to look at a distributed a distributed energy microgrids, with all the options that are available, microgrids, PPAs, et cetera. So that may come up probably to not in July, but maybe for, August, or the board meets in August or in September.
Okay.
But and I think Jeff, is very much interested in that. And then the objective is to do kind of like what the windmills are, i.e. really encourage very much local development. So we're, building stuff here.
Mhm.
So we'll see there.
Okay.
Agenda items. I can present once again the energy ordinance, but everyone's kind of seen it already. So there isn't that much to do. I can, throw it in the package because it's there. But, it'll just be a reporting item and say, this is what we're working on as part of the, the things to go to council. I'll provide the legislative regulatory update and DCE. And
Yeah, I think if we're not looking for their input on anything, we should probably not include it.
yeah, it'll just be, I'll just talk about it in the report,
Yeah.
and say that we discussed it, it will be, maybe worked on over the summer with an objective to present it to council.
Mhm.
I'll include in my report my recommendation that the city work on, we work together on a renewable energy for commercial ordinance. So I'll include that. I'll summarize our discussion with David, but I'll let you that clearly is council direction. So you can introduce it and then I can chime in as appropriate at the meeting.
Sure.
And I think that's about it.
All right.
All right, so I'll start working on the report. You may not see it until, you probably don't want to look at it before. You probably have more than enough things to do between now and Thursday afternoon. So I may work on it just because it's fresh in my mind and I haven't taken simultaneous notes because I only have 2 screens. It's just easier to do that. So I'll probably I may do an initial draft just to sort of get you guys to sort of make sure I haven't missed anything. And then I'll refine it. I'll refine it and so you'll have it for when you come back.
Great. All right. Super.
Okay, and then discuss date of the next meeting. I mean, we can go dark in August. This is sort of the July meeting. For August, we can potentially go dark, but if we need to meet, we'll meet. As there's only those couple of days.
Yeah, let's see what the follow-up is, especially on the, well, 2 things that we're working on. So we probably should talk about those things at some point.
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll just leave it at TBD and we'll see with the new commissioners whether they want to join us. And then I'll also mention in the report, and I just got an email on that, is the webinar that I'll be doing in August on our development. I may just say that I may not have that much to report, but saying that this is sort of where we use this to and this is where it fits in with our overall policy objectives. To say, and then we're going to take it to council in the fall, but this is where the software has been very helpful in helping us refine the policy proposals. So I'll just include that in the report as well, and then I'll send you the slides. So just got an email about what our deadlines are.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
All right, have a good break and we'll stay in touch, and then let me know if there's anything that you want me to do with planning or David or whatever, and I'll follow up with Jeff also on that ordinance because some input from him would be helpful even before we go to full council.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right, see you all soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.